Hello USC fans, Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino. We're here inside the Coliseum after the USC spring game. Spring camp 2024 is in the books. Chris, the defense today got the better of the offense by a score of, I think, what, 43-28? Do I have that right?
Sounds about right.
The defense started with 24 points, so the offense was always having to play from behind, and a couple early turnovers made it so they couldn't get back into the game. But I think the big story today is the defense. You were on the sideline for this game, and it just looked like the defense was having a lot of fun, right?
Super amount of fun on that sideline. I actually started filming down here and taking photos on the defensive side. Just want to see what it was about. Then I moved to the offense the second time, but I almost didn't leave the defensive side because there was just so much action going on. A lot of smiles, a lot of swagger. We saw that out on the field, but just seeing those new coaches interact with each other is really cool. Everyone looked like they were a close-knit bond. Everyone was celebrating for everyone. You know, there were some guys that got multiple interceptions or across the board. So a lot of fun, a lot of celebrating, a lot of trash talking a little bit to the offensive side. So it was a good day all around to be a defensive player.
And that sort of bleeds into what we heard really last week, but also after the game from Lincoln Riley and some of the players. The culture seems good. The vibes, Lincoln Riley said, are better with this year's team than the previous two teams he's had at USC. We'll see if that translates to wins in the fall, but right now I think there's a lot of good feelings around the program. Let's get into the game. So right away, the secondary really stood out. DeCarlos Nicholson on the first series for the USC offense, he had a really nice pass breakup on a third down, and then he had an interception of Jaden Maeva, I believe. From there, Marcellus Williams, the true freshman early enrollee, picked off Miller Moss, and then Malachi Crawford picked off Jake Jensen on a throw that wasn't very good. The other two throws, the interceptions before the Jensen one, Riley described as not awful decisions, just the defensive backs making really good plays. I think the overarching theme from today, though, Chris, is D'Anton Lynn and Doug Belk. They had a really nice camp. We saw it in the game today. The defensive backs did really well. Starts with DeCarlos Nicholson, but I thought Anthony Beavers did really well. That whole group, the corners and the safeties, that's the big takeaway for me.
Yeah, I think coming into spring camp, we were very high on that secondary, just with Doug Belk, with his background, you know, coming from Alabama, or being a graduate assistant there at Alabama, Linear, and Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, and then D'Anton Lynn. You know, he's a safety coach by trade, and what he's able to do, learning at the NFL level, we felt very confident that that secondary could see a huge jump, and we saw it right here on that field. They were making plays all over the field, getting to the ball, and just that defense was making those QBs put the ball in a tight window. And even if you don't make the play, you're stressing the offense to have to make a really, really good throw, almost a perfect throw to make the play on them. And we saw a lot of bodies around the ball. That's why they were able to get some of those tip drill passes. You know, it's hard to predict interceptions or how good a team will be at interceptions, but if you can get your players in the right position, you know, those tip passes, they become a lot easier, like you saw with the Prophet Brown, which, like we saw with the Malachi Crawford. Just being in the right position leads them to getting turnovers, and we saw that on the field today.
And I didn't even mention the Prophet Brown one. So on a goal-to-go situation for Miller Moss and the USC offense, he tries to fit in a slant to Kyron Hudson that Jacoby Covington knocks into the air. Prophet Brown snags in the end zone, takes it 100 yards for the pick six, which was 7 points for the USC defense. I believe in the post-game interview, Brown said he got to like 21 or 22 miles per hour, which he hadn't done before, and that speaks to the offseason conditioning. The defensive backs, I think, won the day. How about some of the early enrollee freshmen, though? Some guys who really stood out. Marcellus Williams, of course. I thought Cameron Fountain had a couple nice plays in the first quarter. He stuffed Brian Jackson on a third and short, and then on another play later on, he had another run stuff. I felt like he really stood out to me. And then Elijah Newby and Desmond Stevens, the true freshman linebackers for USC. Newby was all over the field today. I think he led the team with 5 tackles. Stevens had 4 tackles. Those are guys who look like they belonged, and I believe they got into the game over Rajon Davis, who's missed a lot of time because of a wrist and hand injury. But those guys, I think they put their best foot forward so far in spring camp. There's some really exciting pieces on this defense who are really young as well, and then Brian Jackson probably and DJ Jordan are probably the best early enrollee guys from today on offense, but I felt like Fountain, Williams, Stevens, and Newby were great today.
Especially Newby, just that speed he brings from that body type, and we had an idea that he was going to be flying around the field, knowing, you know, he comes with a track background at that 6'3" size, and he's a freak athlete, and we saw that on the field, him running all around. He even knocked into Jaden Maeva in the backfield. He was like, that was on me, that was on me. He got there too quick, but that's in the fall, that's going to be okay for him to hit the quarterbacks. But yeah, I was really impressed with some of those guys. Jade Abasiri, you know, just looking at him, big monster of a guy. I posted a video of him warming up. He does not look like a true freshman. Cameron Fountain got into some action, as you mentioned. Yeah, I mean, this was a great opportunity, and that was something that Lincoln Riley mentioned. This was a great opportunity for these young guys to get out there, because you just can't replicate this type of what a season's going to look like in a game. So being able to put them in the Coliseum, in front of some fans, get some competitive juices going, it's all good for the freshmen. And I think a lot of them really impressed. I know this wasn't the most highly rated class that USC had at 2024, but overall I think they got some really good dudes and some guys who are going to contribute this season.
On the defensive front, Dejan Lafitte, the reserve interior lineman, was the only defensive lineman who recorded a tackle for loss today. No Barry Alexander. I felt like USC missed him. The offensive line, I felt like, did a really good job, but they weren't necessarily going up against the best USC defensive players because Barry Alexander wasn't out there. We heard in the post-game press conference, Chris, Mason Murphy, he's at right tackle. Jonah Monheim described Murphy as someone who's really matured and taken a big step over these past couple months. Lincoln Riley had similar thoughts. It sounds like USC is good with Murphy at right tackle, and while they'll look to bring in some depth at tackle, I expect Mason Murphy, after what we heard today, to be the starter at right tackle. I think the only position that's really up in the air right now is right guard, where Alani Noah started, but Amos Talele got some reps as well, and when the USC first-team offensive line, everyone besides Noah was out there, Talele got to play with them as well, so I think that's the only spot that's up in the air. The offensive line looked good today, but I don't know if we can necessarily have any big takeaways because I felt like the defensive line was undermanned and a little bit underwhelming today. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. You just wanted to see some progression from those guys. Elijah Page, you wanted to see with him, some of those live bullets flying. Mason Murphy, is a guy we've talked about who has a lot of experience, bouncing around the guard, to tackle, right and both left. So he's going to be given the opportunity to start on this team. They just need to find that consistency with Mason Murphy. He's a talented player, but you feel like this is the year he's got to put it all together because they are counting on him to anchor that right tackle spot. And if Mason Murphy makes the jump this year, USC's offensive line will be in a much, much better place. And Elijah Page, too, I think, who held his own out there today.
Quarterbacks, Chris, didn't look great today. 2 touchdown passes, but 4 interceptions between the group. Miller Moss with 2 of the interceptions. He still seemed to be in really good spirits after the game, and Lincoln Riley said if the season started tomorrow, Miller would be the guy at QB1 for USC, but he didn't name him the definitive starter for the fall, which I thought was interesting. I don't really feel like you can take anything away one way or the other based off of 2 halves or 2 quarters in a spring game where no one's really going 100%. You can't really hit. Lincoln Riley called it when the ones were going against the ones, they were thudding instead of tackling, which is just kind of bumping into one another. My concern level with the quarterbacks isn't high, but I didn't feel like Miller Moss had a great day. Jaden Maeve also had a pick. He ran the ball a little bit more. I thought the design runs with him were interesting, and he had a nice touchdown pass to Makai Lemon. Thoughts on the quarterbacks? Didn't look great, but I don't think it's a real problem going forward.
I think we need to stress when we're talking about the spring game, it's never as bad as it seems. Yeah. It's never as good as it seems as well. Defense wasn't the number 1 defense in the country right there. The offense wasn't the worst offense you've ever seen. It was just a mixed bag. And, yeah, I have no concern with the offense. I mean, just a couple months ago, we saw what Miller Moss could do with this offense running at kind of full steam, with 6 touchdown passes. You know what he can do. And, this wasn't indicative of what he can do. And, Lincoln Riley did say he only really made 1 bad decision, that first interception. That second one, he did a good ball, but, Kyron Hudson didn't come down with the catch and got batted up, ball didn't go their way. So he was kind of given he wasn't putting that one on Miller. So for the most part, Miller said he thought they operated well throughout the most of the defense. They just got to clean up those mistakes and, not give the ball away and have, I know it's an ugly stat line with 4 interceptions or 5 interceptions, whatever you want to call it, but yeah, just not a great day for the offense. But again, I wouldn't be concerned. I think Lincoln Riley's we know is a QB whisperer. He'll get that offense rolling, and it's just a spring game.
And it was stressed to me that Lincoln Riley is already thinking about LSU. He doesn't want to put anything on tape right now. I think that's why we didn't see a ton from Jacoby Lane today. Lane had a few nice catches, but he didn't really see that game-breaking ability that we saw in the Holiday Bowl. Like I said, it's been stressed to me that Riley is thinking about LSU, and he doesn't want to put some stuff on tape that could really hurt them in that first game. So I think he kept it vanilla today, and that's what we can expect.
Are you saying Lincoln Riley's paranoid about people seeing his plays? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
News to me.
Let's get into some of the post-game stuff. Chris, do you have any final game thoughts?
I did want to, shout out some of the receivers. I thought Makai Lemon played really well, led the team with 6 receptions, 52 yards, caught every target that went his way. Makai Lemon, a guy who didn't get a ton of love compared to those other guys last season, Jacoby Lane, Deuce Robinson, Zachariah Branch, but He looked good in that Holiday Bowl, even though it was a limited amount of reps. After playing cornerback,
Yeah.
he looked great out here, and I thought he was impressive. I think he's going to be a real big contributor for that offense. Well, they need him to be. And then DJ Jordan, Xavier Jordan, the true freshman, the early enrollee, the only wide receiver they signed in 2024, showed some nice yards after catch ability, showed some elusiveness. I think you gotta play him. He's built up for the rotation. They only have 7 receivers. They'll address that in the transfer portal, bringing in some more bodies, but DJ Jordan looks like he's on track to play this season.
Especially with the way the numbers are right now, but you mentioned it, they probably will look to add someone. Mekhi Lemon's a dog. I think he's going to have a real breakout season, so I'm excited to watch that. In terms of what we heard after the game, we heard from Lincoln Riley and then 3 players on offense, 3 players on defense. We can start with Riley. He's big about the narratives, the perception. He wants everyone to know that the defense, this group is getting much better coaching than they did last season. They're much improved, especially at the defensive back spot. That was really drilled home in the post-game press conference. I don't want to say he was calling out the last staff. I think that's a step too far, but it was just striking to me where he said Coach Belk and Danton Lynn are 2 of the best defensive coaches who both happen to coach the secondary in the country, and what you saw today is what happens when you have coaches of that caliber in the room. So it's hard not to think about the staff from last year, and I just think today Lincoln Riley, what he really wanted to push was that the defense is improved. They're a lot better, and watch out for USC's defense. We'll see in the fall, and Riley said that too. The spring game doesn't mean a whole lot, but I think it's fair to say there were some defensive improvements today, and the unit is in a better spot. Now they just got to go prove it in the fall.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit more like, look, these are the guys I wanted to bring in. And I was a little bit right, a little bit right. We're seeing the development. I said if you come to USC, you're gonna get developed. I think he was like, because there was a lot of recruits in the house. I think he's like putting that soundbite out there.
He did say development.
Development, yeah. He's back, trying to live up to what he promised a couple months ago. Like if you come to USC, you will be developed. And at least with the secondary, we saw those results out in the field. And we have to remember they weren't even full strength. You're out John Humphrey, who had that minor surgery. He's gonna be out till fall. Jalen Smith, probably your starting nickel, was not there today. And then Zion Branch is a guy you're getting back in the fall, and he's a starting caliber level player and a guy who I expect to see in the rotation. So that's 3 kind of starter levels you were out in the secondary. So the ceiling much higher from the secondary from what we saw. And yeah, a lot of praise for Danton Lynn and Doug Belk, and deservedly so. They were the star coaches from today and from what their players put on the field.
Chris, like 4 months ago, we talked about which unit on defense is going to be the most improved. I said the secondary, and today,
here's your pat on the back.
Thank you. I think today that was that played out. We'll see what USC does in the transfer portal, because I think there's some moves to be made on the defensive line. So what we saw today won't be the group heading into the fall. I thought some of the defensive players who spoke had some really interesting things to say. We heard from Kamari Ramsey, we heard from Jamil Muhammad, and we heard from Prophet Brown. It was interesting. I asked Jamil Muhammad just the feelings that he has right now compared to the end of the regular season last year, how frustrating that was, where the defense couldn't stop anyone, and week after week he had to answer questions about the poor performances. And he said, I feel night and day. We're just in such a better spot. Now we have to go prove it in the fall, of course, but the vibes are just so much better. He said the team's really hungry. They felt like they could have played even better today defensively. They're really looking forward to September 1st against LSU. I think as far as spring camp goes, and I wrote the column on USCfootball.com, the culture and just what USC and Riley wanted to accomplish this spring, you have to say that what they wanted to accomplish, they have accomplished, which is improve the defense and have the vibes be improved. Will it lead to wins? That remains to be seen. But I feel like spring camp, check that box. It was a good camp.
Yeah, remember, they ended the season on a high note. It was a bad season, but you got that momentum. Several months ago, we were talking about it on Petco Park Field.
That was a fun one.
That was a fun one, just about the momentum this team had created for the offseason. And we got to see that next step of the momentum for the spring game, especially for the defense. No one was expecting them to come out and play the way they did against Louisville in that Holiday Bowl. No one was really expecting the offense to put up 6 touchdowns behind Miller Moss. I think we thought they'd play okay, but we were all expecting that defense to look the same that we've seen the past several weeks, and they came out and impressed people, and they showed a different side of them, and we're seeing that momentum build. A little bit more momentum today, and I think they deserve a pat on the back for all the work they put in, and put all the work they've grinded through the winter with changing their bodies, and the new coaches developing them. And again, it's not the final product, not even close, and if this was, they'd be in trouble, because still a lot to go. There's still several months until LSU. Got a really tough schedule in the Big Ten. They need to get better. They are better from what they were several months ago, but they're still on the right path, and it looks like they're going in the right trajectory.
Kamari Ramsey also talked about upholding the standard, and if the coaching staff maybe calls the wrong play, it's still on the players to execute even if they're not put in the best position. And the coaching staff has talked a lot about Ramsey, how he's really helped this defense because he was with Lynn last year, but just the standard that he can set has been really influential, and that sort of played out, I felt like, in the post-game press conference. Prophet Brown talked about his speed and some of the differences between last year and this year as well. We can wrap up with this, Chris. Jonah Monheim, Miller Moss, and Zachariah Branch were the 3 offensive representatives. Any takeaways from what they had to say?
Pretty standard. I mean, Jonah, center of the future, or center for this season, still developing, but way ahead of schedule, as he said. Had some good things to say about Elijah Page, Mason Murphy, as you mentioned earlier. They didn't seem concerned about they
did not.
It was just another practice to them. They'll get better. And again, like you mentioned, Lincoln Riley's not showing anything from cards up his sleeve, so they'll be all right. They didn't seem any concern. It was just like, yeah, it wasn't a great day, but we'll get better and we'll learn. And yeah, no concern at all.
I said we'll wrap up. I have one other thought that just popped into my head. Yeah. Transfer portal and just off-season notes. Feels like USC desperately needs some help on the defensive line, especially with Isaiah Rakes leaving. I feel a little bit better about the offensive line today than I did yesterday or even in past weeks, but I still think they need some help there. Receiver is another position of need. I think they could add a body. Outside of that, I think it's all about that defensive line addition, getting a guy on the O-line, and the receiver. I don't really see any big needs outside of that, but the needs that they do have, I think, are significant.
Right, yeah, I think you just got to go all in on getting some big defensive tackles in here, experienced guys that can help you this season. I would still, argue you should get another offensive tackle body, or at least an interior offensive lineman. Someone who can play both, whatever. I think you need to get someone in that room. I've been a proponent of them bringing in a running back, but the running backs look pretty good today, and I would, venture to say they don't need they can save that scholarship and use it for something else. We didn't really talk about the running backs, but the young guys really impressed. They were being physical. I know you predicted 2 touchdowns from Brian Jackson, and you got it.
Let's go.
You didn't say they would have 4 turnovers, though. You were against.
I said the offense was going to win, I think, and they got killed.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'll take my wins when I can get them.
Take the wins when you can get them. But, yeah, Brian Jackson looked great. Quentin Joyner, Marion Peterson running hard. Woody Marks was, they didn't want to run him too hard. He's a veteran, just like we expected, just like they did with Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd last year. He's played a lot of ball. Don't need to risk getting him out hurt in the spring game. So, yeah, I thought the running backs were really impressive, and the young guys look good.
I agree. He's Chris Trevino. I'm Connor Morrissette. That's a wrap for USCFootball.com's instant analysis coverage of spring camp. We'll still have a whole bunch of articles on the site. And, of course, the transfer portal, that's not closing for another week, I believe. So we'll have plenty of coverage of that as well. Thanks, as always, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.